Remember when car designers in the 90s completely lost their minds? When automakers thought oval headlights, plastic cladding, and jelly bean shapes were the future of automotive design? The 1990s gave us some incredible machines, but it also produced some of the most questionable automotive designs ever to roll off an assembly line. We're talking about cars so ugly they made the AMC Pacer look like a Ferrari. Today we're counting down 20 of the most visually challenged vehicles from the decade that taste forgot. From dustbuster minivans to cars that looked like melted soap bars, these automotive eyesores prove that not every design experiment should make it to production. So buckle up as we explore the Automotive Hall of Shame. And hey, if this brings back some traumatic memories of your family's old car, hit that like button and subscribe for more automotive content. Number 20. Subaru SVX 1991. The Subaru SVX was supposed to be Subaru's Grand Touring flagship, a luxury coupe that would compete with European Grand Tours. What they delivered was, well, something else entirely. The most bizarre feature had to be those windows. Windows within windows. The main side glass didn't roll down completely. Instead, there was this smaller section within the window that opened. It looked like someone had designed a car window, then decided halfway through that they needed another window inside that window. The result was this heavy, awkward glass arrangement that made the whole car look clumsy. The body itself was this massive, swooping thing that seemed to be going in 3 different directions at once. From the front, it had these narrow, squinting headlights that made it look perpetually suspicious. The rear was this heavy, drooping mass of metal that seemed to be melting off the back of the car. And those wheel arches. They were these perfectly round circles that looked completely out of place on the angular body. It was like someone had stuck wagon wheels on a spaceship. The SVX actually had decent performance. A 3.3-liter flat-six engine, all-wheel drive. It could move, but nobody cared because they couldn't get past how it looked. Subaru tried to market it as sophisticated and aerodynamic. The aerodynamics were actually impressive with a drag coefficient of just 0.29, but being slippery through the air doesn't make you pretty. Sales were dismal. They hoped to sell 10,000 per year. They barely managed 14,000 total over 6 years. Even Subaru employees reportedly called it the flying potato behind closed doors. Number 19, Oldsmobile Silhouette 1990. General Motors called it the Cadillac of minivans. Customers called it the dustbuster. The Oldsmobile Silhouette, along with its siblings, the Pontiac Trans Sport and Chevrolet Lumina APV, represented GM's attempt to reinvent the minivan. They succeeded, just not in a good way. The Silhouette looked like someone had taken a normal minivan and stretched it through a funhouse mirror. The front end was this massive expanse of plastic that seemed to go on forever. The windshield was so raked it was almost horizontal. You sat so far back from the front of the vehicle that parallel parking required a sextant and a prayer. But the real problem was all that plastic, acres and acres of gray plastic cladding. It covered the entire lower half of the vehicle like the world's ugliest skirt. The plastic was supposed to be practical, resistant to dings and scratches. Instead, it just looked cheap. Within a few years, it would fade to this horrible chalky gray that made the van look even worse. The wheel wells were covered in so much plastic they looked like they were wearing protective padding. The interior was even stranger. The dashboard was approximately 3 miles away from the driver. The massive windshield created this greenhouse effect that cooked occupants in summer. And those modular seats that GM bragged about, they weighed approximately 800 pounds each. The Silhouette did have one brief moment of fame when it appeared in the movie Get Shorty. John Travolta's character called it the Cadillac of minivans. It became a running joke, even Hollywood was mocking it. Number 18, Alfa Romeo SZ 1990. Italians are supposed to be good at design, fashion, architecture, cars. The Alfa Romeo SZ proved that even Italy could have an off day. They actually called it Il Mostro, the monster. When the manufacturer's own countrymen are calling your car a monster, you know you've created something special, and not in a good way. The SC looked like it had been designed with a ruler and a hacksaw. Every line was harsh, every angle was sharp. The front end had these stacked rectangular headlights that looked like they'd been stolen from a 1980s Volvo. The body panels appeared to have been cut rather than shaped. Straight lines everywhere. No curves, no flow. just brutal, angular surfaces that met at uncomfortable angles. The rear was this flat, vertical wall with taillights that looked like an afterthought. Even the wheels were wrong. These telephone dial things that looked like they belonged on a completely different car. The whole thing sat on a shortened Alfa 75 platform, giving it these weird proportions that made it look like someone had compressed a normal car in a vise. Here's the really tragic part. Underneath all that angular ugliness was a brilliant car, a 3-liter V6 engine, near perfect weight distribution, sophisticated suspension. It handled like a dream, or road testers raved about its performance, but nobody wanted to be seen in it. They only made about 1,000 of them. Today they're actually collectible. Ugly collectible, but collectible. Alfa Romeo tried to defend the design, saying it was uncompromising and pure. Customers said it looked like it had been designed by someone who had only heard descriptions of cars but had never actually seen one. Number 17. Buick Riviera, 1995. The Riviera nameplate had heritage, style, class. Previous generations had been elegant personal luxury coupes. The 1995 redesign threw all that away for this. It looked like someone had inflated a 1993 Riviera until it was about to pop. Everything was round, bulbous, swollen. The front end was dominated by this massive oval grille that looked like the car was gasping for air, or screaming. The headlights were these thin slits above the grille that gave it a perpetually sleepy expression. The profile was supposed to be flowing and aerodynamic. Instead, it looked like a beluga whale on wheels. There was no definition, no character lines. Just this smooth, featureless blob of metal that seemed to go on forever. The rear was even worse. This drooping, melted trunk that looked like it was slowly sliding off the back of the car. The taillights were these weird oval things that didn't match anything else on the vehicle. Even the exhaust pipes looked confused about what car they were attached to. Buick tried to market it as bold and avant-garde. They talked about its expressive design language and dramatic presence. What it expressed was that someone in the design department had lost their mind. Sales reflected public opinion. The previous generation had sold reasonably well. This one tanked. Hard. They kept making it for 4 years, each year selling fewer than the last. By 1999, they mercy killed it. The Riviera nameplate, which had survived since 1963, died with this bloated whale of a car. It never came back. Number 16. Mercury Sable, 1996. If the Ford Taurus was the ugly sister, the Mercury Sable was the even uglier twin. Mercury took everything wrong with the 96 Taurus and somehow made it worse. Those oval headlights that everyone hated on the Taurus, the Sables were even more oval, even more droopy. They looked like the car was permanently sad about its own existence. The grille was this weird chrome mustache that connected the two headlights in the most unflattering way possible. It gave the front end this dopey, mouth-breathing expression that was impossible to take seriously. But the rear. Oh, the rear. While the Taurus had that controversial oval window, the Sable had this light bar that wrapped completely around the back. It was supposed to be futuristic. Instead, it looked like the car was wearing a visor backwards. At night, when all those lights were on, it looked like a UFO having an identity crisis. The trunk lid was this massive flat expanse that seemed to collect dirt and water in all the wrong places. Mercury executives defended the design, claiming it was distinctive and would age gracefully. It aged about as gracefully as milk left in the sun. Within a few years, these things looked dated and tired. The ovoid theme extended to everything. Door handles, mirrors, even the radio buttons were oval. It was like the designers had just discovered the oval tool in their CAD software and couldn't stop using it. Sales were predictably terrible. The Sable had been Mercury's bestseller. After this redesign, sales dropped by 40%. Mercury never really recovered. This generation of Sable was part of what eventually killed the brand. Number 15. Hyundai Atos, 1997. The Hyundai Atos proved that making a small car doesn't mean you can ignore design completely. This Korean city car looked like it had been assembled from spare parts left over from other vehicles. The proportions were all wrong. It was tall, narrow, unstable looking. like someone had taken a normal car and stretched it vertically in Photoshop. The wheels were these tiny 13-inch things that looked like they'd been stolen from a shopping cart. The track was so narrow it looked like it might tip over in a strong wind. The front end was this flat panel with headlights that seemed surprised to be there. The grille was an afterthought, just some plastic slats thrown on, because cars need grills. The bumpers were these massive plastic things that looked like they were designed for a different car entirely. They stuck out from the body like the car was wearing a suit, 3 sizes too big. The greenhouse was enormous. Windows everywhere, which would be great except they were all flat. Vertical. It looked like a goldfish bowl on wheels. Hyundai marketed it as practical and economical, which it was. You could fit a surprising amount of stuff inside. It got great gas mileage. It was cheap. But being practical doesn't excuse looking like it was designed by someone who had never seen a car before. In some markets, they called it the Amica or the Santro, like changing the name would make people forget what it looked like. It didn't work. Even in markets where tiny cars were normal, the Atos stood out for all the wrong reasons. Other manufacturers made small cars that looked decent. Hyundai made this. Number 14. Daihatsu Naked, 1999. Yes, that was really its name. The Daihatsu Naked. And yes, it looked exactly as awkward as that name suggests. The concept was actually interesting. Exposed bolts and panels that could be easily replaced. Utilitarian design that celebrated function over form. The execution was unfortunate. It looked like someone had forgotten to finish building it. All the bolts holding the body panels were visible, exposed, like the car was constantly under construction. The panels themselves were flat, completely flat. No curves anywhere. It was like someone had welded together a bunch of sheet metal and called it a day. The doors looked like they'd been cut out with tin snips. The hood was this flat slab that met the windshield at an uncomfortable angle. Even the mirrors looked like afterthoughts stuck on, with visible bolts like someone had bought them at an auto parts store and attached them in their driveway. The color options made it worse. They offered it in these industrial colors. Flat grays, military greens, colors that emphasized its unfinished appearance. The interior continued the theme. Exposed metal everywhere, bolts visible on the dashboard. It was like sitting inside a piece of industrial equipment. Daihatsu claimed it was honest design that celebrated simplicity. Critics said it looked like a car that had been stripped for parts and then reassembled incorrectly. Even in Japan's K-car market, where weird designs were common, the Naked stood out as particularly unfortunate. They only sold it for 4 years before quietly discontinuing it. Number 13. Honda SMX, 1996. Honda described the SMX as a small car with a big heart. Everyone else described it as a refrigerator with wheels. This Japanese domestic market special took minimalism to an extreme that bordered on nihilism. The design brief seemed to be, make it as boring as physically possible. They succeeded beyond anyone's wildest nightmares. The SMX was essentially a box, a perfectly rectangular box with windows. The only interesting feature was that it had one sliding door on one side and a regular door on the other. Not interesting good. Interesting, like, why would you do that? The front end was this flat panel with headlights that looked like they'd been drawn on with a marker. No character, no style. Just the minimum required to be legally considered a vehicle. The side profile was a straight line from front to back. No curves, no character lines. Nothing to break up the monotony of that slab-sided body. It looked like someone had taken a shipping container and added the minimum necessary components to make it street legal. Honda's marketing called it stylish and urban. It was about as stylish as a concrete block. The interior was supposedly inspired by a sofa. Not a nice sofa. The kind of sofa you'd find in a doctor's waiting room. Beige. Forgettable. Purely functional. Even the name was weird. SMX. What did it mean? Honda never really explained. Some said it stood for Street Mover X. Others suspected it stood for Should Manufacturers Exist. It lasted just 3 years in production, selling primarily to people who had given up on life and just needed transportation. Number 12. Nissan S-Cargo, 1990. The Nissan S-Cargo was supposed to be retro cute. A callback to the Citroën 2CV with a Japanese twist. What they created looked like a cartoon snail that had been stepped on. The name was a pun. Escargot. S-Cargo. Get it? The French word for snail, because it looked like a snail. A really, really ugly snail. The body was this bulbous thing that seemed to be melting. The roof was perfectly round, like someone had just placed a dome on top of a box. The front end had these round headlights that looked like googly eyes, the kind you'd stick on a craft project. Below them was this tiny grille that looked like a mouth permanently frozen in surprise. The whole front gave it this shocked expression, like the car itself couldn't believe how it looked. The windows were these little porthole things that were completely out of proportion with the rest of the vehicle. The rear window was particularly strange, this tiny oval that provided almost no visibility. But here's the really weird part. They only made about 12,000 of them, all for the Japanese market, and they've become cult collectibles. People actually want them now. Not because they're beautiful, because they're so spectacularly odd that they've circled back around to being interesting. Pike Factory, Nissan's Special Projects division, called it nostalgic design for the future. Critics called it what happens when car designers take too much cold medication. The interior was even stranger, with a speedometer that looked like it was stolen from a 1950s kitchen appliance. Number 11, Audi A-two, 1999. Audi makes beautiful cars, usually. The A-two was their attempt at a premium small car. What they created looked like someone had put an Audi in the dryer on high heat and shrunk it. But not proportionally. It shrunk weird. The A-two was tall and narrow, like someone had squeezed a normal car from the sides. The result was this awkward, upright stance that made it look perpetually unstable. The wheels seemed too small. The body seemed too tall. Nothing looked right. The front end was recognizable as an Audi, but wrong. Like an Audi drawn from memory by someone who had only seen one once. The grille was there, but pinched. The headlights were there, but squinting. It was like looking at an Audi through a funhouse mirror. The profile was the worst angle. This tall, narrow thing that looked like it might fall over if you looked at it wrong. The windows were huge, which should have been good for visibility, but just made the car look even more awkward. Audi packed it with technology, aluminum space frame construction, incredibly efficient diesel engines. It was one of the most fuel-efficient cars ever made, achieving 3 liters per 100 kilometers. But nobody cared, because it looked like a tall, narrow mistake. They marketed it as the future of premium small cars. The future apparently looked pretty grim. Sales were terrible. Audi expected to sell 60,000 per year. They barely managed 20,000 on their best year. It lasted just 6 years before Audi quietly killed it and pretended it never happened. Number 10. Volkswagen Polo Harlequin, 1995. Volkswagen had an idea. What if we made a car with mismatched body panels? On purpose, as a feature. The Polo Harlequin wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a manufacturing error. Someone at Volkswagen deliberately decided to build a car that looked like it had been assembled from parts stolen from 4 different vehicles. Each Harlequin had panels in 4 colors: red, yellow, blue, and green. But not in any logical pattern. The hood might be red, the driver's door blue, the passenger door yellow, the trunk green. The original plan was to make just 1,000 for the European market, a special edition to showcase the Polo's modular construction. But here's the insane part. They were somewhat popular. Not because they looked good, because they were so spectacularly bizarre that people wanted to own one just for the attention. Volkswagen ended up making about 3,800 of them. They looked like a bag of Skittles had exploded in the factory. Or like someone had tried to repair accident damage with whatever parts they could find at a junkyard. The color combinations followed specific patterns. There were actually 4 base variants, each starting with a different primary color. But to the casual observer, they just looked random. Chaotic, wrong. Driving one was an experience. Every gas station stop became a conversation. Usually starting with, what happened to your car? Volkswagen tried the concept again in 1996 with the Golf Harlequin for the North American market. It was even less successful. Turns out Americans were even less interested in driving a rainbow nightmare than Europeans. Number 9, Toyota Previa, 1990. The Toyota Previa looked like an egg. Not kind of like an egg, not egg-shaped. An actual egg with wheels. Toyota's first attempt at a mid-engine minivan resulted in this aerodynamic suppository that looked like it had been designed in a wind tunnel by engineers who had never seen a car. The engine was under the floor, in the middle of the vehicle. This created some interesting packaging solutions and one very unfortunate shape. The front end just wasn't. There was no hood, no front. Just this curved surface that started at the windshield and ended at the ground. The windshield was almost horizontal. Cleaning it required a ladder and a very long arm. In summer, the greenhouse effect was so severe that Toyota had to add ice-cold air conditioning just to keep occupants from roasting. The driving position was bizarre. You sat on top of the front wheels with your feet pointing down at a 45-degree angle. It felt like driving while sitting on a bar stool. The side profile was the worst angle. This perfect oval that looked like someone had laid an egg on its side and attached wheels. But the Previa was actually brilliant in many ways. The mid-engine layout gave it surprisingly good handling for a minivan. The interior space was excellent. It was reliable, practical, everything Toyota was known for. It just happened to look like something that had been expelled from a very large chicken. They sold it for 7 years in the US. Sales started okay, but dropped every year as people realized they'd have to look at it every morning in their driveway. Toyota replaced it with the Sienna, which looked like a normal minivan. Sales immediately improved. Number 8. Isuzu VehiCROSS, 1997. The Isuzu VehiCROSS started life as a concept car. Usually concept cars get toned down for production, made more practical, more conventional, not the VehiCROSS. Isuzu looked at their wild concept and said, yes, let's build exactly that. The result was this bizarre SUV that looked like it had a skin condition. The body was covered in this black plastic cladding that had a texture, not a smooth texture, this weird bumpy, almost organic texture that made it look like the car had broken out in hives. The headlights were these bug-eye things that protruded from the body like the car was permanently surprised. The grille was this tiny little slot that looked completely inadequate for cooling an engine. The hood had these weird bulges and ridges that served no purpose except to make it look even stranger. The rear was somehow worse. The spare tire was mounted on the back door but partially obscured the rear window. The taillights were hidden behind more of that textured plastic cladding. Here's the really frustrating part. Underneath all that weird styling was a genuinely capable off-roader. It had Isuzu's sophisticated torque-on-demand four-wheel drive system. A powerful V6 engine, it could climb mountains, ford rivers, go places other SUVs couldn't dream of. But nobody wanted to be seen in it while doing those things. Isuzu only brought about 4,000 to the United States. They planned for more, but quickly realized that capability doesn't sell if the vehicle looks like it has a disease. Today they're actually somewhat collectible, mainly because they're so weird and so rare. Number 7. Suzuki X-90, 1995. The Suzuki X-90 answered a question nobody asked. What if we made a two-seat SUV with a removable roof? The result was this bizarre vehicle that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Was it a sports car, an SUV, a mistake? Definitely the third one. It looked like someone had taken a Suzuki Sidekick and performed surgery on it. Bad surgery. The kind where the patient survives but wishes they hadn't. The proportions were all wrong. It was too tall to be a sports car, too small to be a useful SUV. The two seats meant it was useless as a family vehicle. The high center of gravity meant it handled like a shopping cart full of bowling balls. The removable roof panels were supposed to give it a fun, convertible feel. Instead, they leaked. Constantly. And when you removed them, there was nowhere to put them. The tiny trunk was already full if you had more than a sandwich in there. The styling was unique. It looked like a tracker that had been put in a vise and squeezed. The wheelbase was shortened, making it look stubby and awkward. The spare tire was mounted on the back, making the already small vehicle even less practical. The two-tone paint job Suzuki offered just emphasized how weird the proportions were. They marketed it as a fun lifestyle vehicle. The lifestyle in question apparently involved having no friends, no cargo, and no sense of style. Suzuki sold it for just 3 years. Total sales were about 7,400. That's not per year, that's total. Ever. Number 6, BMW Z-three Coupe, 1998. BMW called it a bread van. Everyone else called it the clown shoe. The Z-three Coupe took the Z-three Roadster and added a shooting brake-style roof. The result was unfortunate. From the front, it looked like a normal Z-three. Long hood, classic BMW kidney grills. Then you got to the windshield, and everything went wrong. The roofline was this weird elongated dome that extended all the way to the rear bumper. It looked like someone had grafted the back half of a station wagon onto a sports car. The proportions were the real problem. That long hood combined with the stubby chopped-off rear created this unbalanced look, like the car was about to tip forward. The side profile was especially bad. It looked like a shoe. Specifically, a clown shoe. The nickname stuck immediately and BMW could never shake it. Even BMW employees called it that. The rear window was this massive expanse of glass that looked like it belonged on a different car. The whole back end was just wrong. The tragedy is that the Z-three Coupe was actually a brilliant driver's car, more rigid than the Roadster, better balanced. The M-Coupe version with the M3 engine was a genuine performance machine. Journalists raved about how it drove, but nobody wanted to buy a car that looked like footwear. BMW only sold about 6,000 coupes worldwide over 4 years. That's compared to nearly 300,000 Roadsters. Today, they're actually valuable. Collectors want them because they're rare and drive wonderfully. But they still look like a shoe. Number 5. Buick Skylark, 1992. The Skylark name had history. The original Skylarks from the 50s and 60s were beautiful. The muscle car era Skylarks were legendary. The 1992 Skylark was none of those things. It looked like Buick had tried to design a car using only a protractor and a hatred of beauty. The front end was dominated by this beak-like nose that jutted forward aggressively. It looked like the car was trying to peck something. The wheel wells were surrounded by massive black plastic cladding that seemed to be growing on the car like a fungus. This wasn't subtle trim. This was acres of cheap plastic that covered half the body. Within a few years, this plastic would fade to a horrible gray color that made the car look even worse, if that was possible. The body itself was this awkward collection of angles and bulges that never quite worked together. The roofline was too high, the trunk was too long, the wheels were too small. Nothing was proportional. The interior was even worse. Cheap plastic everywhere. A dashboard that looked like it. Had been designed by someone who had never seen the inside of a car. Seats that were somehow both too soft and uncomfortable. Buick positioned it as an entry-level luxury car. Entry-level to what? Depression. The Skylark lasted just 6 years in this generation. Sales started bad and got worse. By the end, Buick was practically giving them away and people still didn't want them. The Skylark name, which had survived since 1953, died with this generation. It was a mercy killing. Number 4. Ford Scorpio. Mark II, 1994. The Ford Scorpio was supposed to be Ford Europe's executive car, their answer to BMW and Mercedes. The Mark II redesign turned it into their answer to the question, what's the ugliest car ever made? Those headlights, those horrible bulging fisheye headlights, they looked like the car had a thyroid condition. They protruded from the front end like tumors. At night when they were on, the car looked like a deep-sea creature that had surfaced by mistake. The grille was this chrome catfish mouth that seemed to be gasping for air. Or mercy. The whole front end looked like it was melting and someone had stuck lights and a grill on it while it was still soft. The rear was somehow worse. This bloated, shapeless mass with taillights that looked like infected wounds. The trunk lid was enormous and featureless, like someone had forgotten to finish designing it. The whole car looked swollen, diseased, wrong. Ford executives defended the design, claiming it was bold and distinctive. It was certainly distinctive. In the same way that a face tattoo is distinctive, sales were catastrophic. The previous Scorpio had sold reasonably well. This one killed the entire model line. Ford kept making it for 4 years, presumably because they'd already spent the money on tooling. By the end, dealers couldn't give them away. The Scorpio became a meme in Europe, a shorthand for automotive ugliness. Even today, 30 years later, Europeans still reference the Scorpio when talking about ugly cars. Number 3, Pontiac Trans Sport, 1990. While the Oldsmobile Silhouette was bad, the Pontiac Trans Sport was worse. Pontiac took the same dustbuster platform and added their own special touches. Made it sportier, they said. What they made was one of the ugliest vehicles ever to wear the Pontiac Arrowhead. The nose was even longer than the Silhouettes. Even more pointed. It looked like the vehicle was doing 70 miles per hour while standing still. Not in a good way. In a, this looks aerodynamically unstable way. The plastic cladding that plagued all these GM minivans was especially egregious on the Trans Sport. Pontiac added extra plastic, ribs and ridges that were supposed to look sporty but just looked like the van had been attacked by a giant cheese grater. The wheels were these tiny things lost in massive plastic wheel wells that looked like caves. The sliding door on one side and regular door on the other made it look lopsided. Unfinished. Like they'd run out of sliding door mechanisms halfway through production. The marketing was hilariously optimistic. Pontiac actually ran ads calling it the sports car of minivans. Sports car. This thing handled like a mattress on roller skates. The center of gravity was somewhere in the stratosphere. Taking a corner at anything above parking lot speeds felt like a near-death experience. The interior was a sea of cheap plastic that creaked and rattled from day one. The seats were these modular things that were supposed to be versatile, but were mainly just heavy and uncomfortable. Pontiac kept making it until 1996, steadily adding more plastic and making it worse each year. Number 2, Ford Taurus 1996. The 1986 Taurus saved Ford. The 1996 Taurus nearly killed it. Ford executives told designers to make it revolutionary, different, bold. What they made was ugly. Spectacularly, memorably, legendarily ugly. The oval theme wasn't just a design element, it was an obsession. Everything was oval. The headlights, the grille, the rear window, the door handles, the radio buttons, even the cup holders were oval. It was like the designers had just discovered the oval tool in their CAD program and couldn't stop using it. Those headlights. Those horrible, drooping, sad-looking headlights. They made the car look like it was crying, perpetually depressed about its own existence. The grille was this weird oval slot that looked too small for the front end. The hood had this strange bulge that served no purpose, except to make it look even weirder. The rear window was the most controversial element, this perfect oval that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. A really ugly spaceship. The interior continued the oval nightmare. The dashboard was this flowing mass of curves and ovals that looked like it was melting. The instrument cluster was oval. The air vents were oval. Everything was oval except the things that should have been, like the steering wheel, which was this weird four-spoke design that didn't match anything else. Sales fell off a cliff. The previous Taurus had been America's best-selling car. This one sent buyers fleeing to Honda and Toyota. Ford kept it for 4 years, watching sales drop every year. The 1996 Taurus became a cautionary tale in design schools. This is what happens when you take a theme too far. Number 1. Fiat Multipla, 1998. And here it is, the summit of Mount Ugly, the Fiat Multipla. A car so ugly it transcended mere ugliness and became art. Bad art, but art nonetheless. Where do you even start? The two-tier headlights, the ones on the hood and the ones up by the windshield? It looked like the car was wearing bifocals. The bulging greenhouse that sat on top of the body like a tumor. The weird crease that ran along the side, making it look like two different cars had been welded together by someone who didn't care if they matched. The Multipla looked like a frog. Not kind of like a frog. Exactly like a frog. A frog that had been stepped on, but survived. The windshield was almost vertical and seemed to bulge outward. The hood was this tiny vestigial thing that looked like an afterthought. The whole front end looked like it was having an allergic reaction to something. The proportions were all wrong. It was too wide for its height, too short for its width, nothing lined up properly. But here's the really insane part. It was actually brilliant. The interior was incredibly spacious. 6 seats in 2 rows of 3. Fantastic visibility, clever storage solutions everywhere. It was practical, economical, and reliable. Italian families loved it because it actually worked as a family car, but everyone else just saw the frog face, the bulging eyes, the weird proportions. Fiat eventually redesigned it in 2004, making it look more conventional. Sales actually dropped. Turns out the people who bought Multiplas did it because it was weird, make it normal, and even they didn't want it. The original Multipla has become a legend. Not a good legend. The kind of legend parents tell children to make them behave. Eat your vegetables or you'll have to drive a Multipla. And there you have it, 20 automotive disasters from the decade that taste forgot. 20 cars that prove that just because you can design something doesn't mean you should. Did you or your family own any of these rolling catastrophes? Are you still in therapy because of it? Let us know in the comments below. Which one hurt your eyes the most? And hey, if you enjoyed this trip through automotive hell, hit that like button, subscribe for more content about cars you'll never want to own, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our next video. Until next time, just be glad your car doesn't look like a dustbuster or a frog.